Hello, welcome to an interesting video where we're going to be looking at feet and in particular foot stability and how it can greatly affect how we move and influence the stability at all the other joints throughout our entire body. Alright, so let's get right into it because we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So firstly, what are our feet meant to do? Well, they're meant to absorb shock and then provided the ability for us to push off the ground when we walk, run or jump. So they're the very first things to get in contact with the ground. So before we can do anything at any other joint, our feet are really the guys telling everyone what to do, and they need to act very much like a spring, so being able to be soft and flexible to cushion the stress of each step, but then instantly become stiff enough to provide enough power to move us forward and upwards. Problem arises when we lose either one of these two things. So if we become too stiff instead of being flexible, or too flexible instead of becoming stiff. So timing of all these things is very important, and it's often a very missed part of training element, and especially when in regards to injury, it's something that's often missed. So, and the common injuries we often see are, back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain. They're the top three, but coming close behind are foot or ankle things. But really, as I'm about to show you, these foot and ankle things are really laying the foundations for these ones to occur, because if there's a problem at this level, there's an energy leak. So sometimes we see no injury or pain here and the pain's elsewhere, but this is the real problem. So in our previous videos we've discussed this before, with hips and thoracics being the hidden things, and they also are. So this is a bit of what's going on at various things can sort of set off a chain reaction. So, but make no mistake, very much weak feet or stiff ankles are a big part of the problem, and as we've discussed before, sets off a chain reaction. So why feet? Why am I sort of getting big on this? This is not a new thing really. This is something that's been around for a long time. For a while I was struggled with a lack of success and other methods and strategies. People appear to be improving with the things we were working on, but when they stood up it just all fell apart. And why? What were we missing? And we were doing things like bridges, clams, isolated things, and then try to stand them up in a squats and it'd still be terrible. But on the floor they're all passing with flying colours. Everything was great. So it was not those joints we needed to look at. It was the one big factor that was the missing one was the ankle and the foot. So probably the foot before the ankle, as you're about to see. So this is again where we see a lot of people mucking around here. Therapy and that as well, foam rolling, you name it, stretching, but when they stand up they still can't move very well. Alright, so you really need to look at the whole thing. So I've said this many times before, it's a bit of the chicken and the egg. Is it the hip that's created the foot problem or the foot that's created the hip problem? Could be either way. Regardless of it, they're both going to be at play. So if you're only addressing a hip problem with hip stuff and neglecting the foot, then you're going to be in all sorts of trouble. But quite often we're sort of finding the foot is the one that really started it off, and then the other ones might have become a bigger problem later on. All right, so but our method is we've got to sort of approach both. All right, so with the different type of feet, because not everyone's the same. There's a normal foot, flat-footed person, and then there's the hollow high arch person. So you could easily do this yourself by standing on in some water and then stand on some tiles or a concrete, and you'll get the imprint of your foot there, give you a bit of an idea of what type of foot you are. But generally most people would know if they're a flat-footed person. You can really feel it. Usually have a lot of fascia pain and all sorts of stuff, shin splints, Achilles problems if they run. This person, a lot of probably sort of can easily get confused with this one at times, so they sort of don't look too much different. This one we sort of find a lot of ankle problems, but not always. All right, so but that just gives you an idea of different types of feet. All right, so typical foot specific problems we see with the weak feet, bunions. So here's a classic example of a bunion: plantar fasciitis, Achilles, shin splints, all that sort of stuff. Can lead to stress fractures. Is linked to creating other injuries at joints up the chain, so as is the high arch, but this one is sort of related to the excessive pronation. Understand though, the pronation is not bad. Pronation, you actually need it. Without pronation you're in a lot of trouble too. You just need to not have too much of it. It's the problem of having excessive amounts of it that leads to these real big problems of plantar fascia problems and Achilles things and these bunions and stuff as well. All right, so, and as we'll show you later, this is a real problem with a gripping strategy, we call this. All right. Okay, so here's a quick video just giving you an example of what good alignment looks like and what it looks like when you fall into excessive pronation. So here's me just demonstrating what it looks like when my legs are aligned really well, and you can see me pointing right through the middle of my leg right into the down in a straight line from my hip right through the middle of my knee to my second toe. Alright, so that in that position I'm really well structured, not really much can go wrong there, so I can handle running, walking, lunges, squats, everything. Good stability, good strength, everything. The problems arise when basically either my hip loses control or my foot loses control. Now which one goes first, it's hard to say. Sometimes it can be both at the same time, but regardless of the fact, there's going to be a problem. You can see here what I'm showing is my kneecap is really falling inwards, and I've lost my alignment, so now I've got some terrible stuff going on. The main problem is going to be in my knee, but also around the ankle and the foot. Alright, so I'm going to have, and also possibly the hip and lower back, but moving on to other things. So just giving an example of what happens when if this was caused from the foot rolling in. So if my foot was the first thing that fell in, then everything goes with it. Alright, does that make sense? So to see this from side on, so there's where I've got a good sort of stable base and I'm well aligned from front on, and this is what it, oops, if I go back, and this is what it looks like when I collapse. So that's what you would see when I have excessive pronation. So remember, I need a certain degree of pronation. If I don't have enough, if I'm a high arch person and I'm rigid, I can't create my spring to walk and do things. So I'm also going to become stiff when I should be like relaxed, and this person's becoming relaxed when they should become stiff. So you can see like they're both going to have the same injury for a completely different reason. So this is why you need to look at all of them. Generally, most people are going to fall into the excessive pronating side of things. So you can get a good idea. If I magnify the foot here, you can see there's my good arch support there, and then that's when I fall in. So you can see that. See, it just takes everything with me. Alright, so that's what it looks like when you have sloppy feet. So how do we get our feet to become weak in the first place? So poor footwear is the main reason. I wouldn't say the shoes are bad for us, but wearing them too often is, and especially these type of shoes are terrible, and these aren't that much better, to be honest. The heels on them are quite excessive. And they're really these jobs are trying to do the job of what we should be doing with our feet. Alright, so most shoes are putting us in elevated heels and creating short, tight calves, rigid ankles, and weaken our feet. Alright, so flip-flops, or thongs in Australia we call them, even worse, as they create what we know as toe gripping. So you have to sort of hold on to the thing or sort of flip off your shoe. So that strategy of trying to keep your footwear on you is really disrupting the entire mechanism of how you walk. So the timing's all thrown out. Remember, there's like an unlock and lock timing thing. So other factors that are at play that create it: lack of exercise, sitting too much, poor running form, poor training technique, even previous injury. Alright, so the toe gripping thing that we spoke about just quickly, very, very common. This is like a plan B approach to stabilising. So you're basically using your hammer toes, these sort of things is what you see. So clawing, hammer toes. And basically trying to use your toe flexors instead of the foot muscular to give you that extra stability. But what that does is it actually narrows your foot. And that narrow foot is very much like walking on a tightrope. So it makes you more unstable. So then you start searching for other things. So that's when you see the foot, the calves and everything the ankle and the calves try to really stiffen up to give you the stability that you've lost through your feet there. That's why often when we see people do single leg stuff, they complain of their calf about to cramp or their fascia. They're really going into a toe gripping strategy, and they really need to like widen the toes. As you can see here, you sort of really need to have this wider base. Alright, so you always find single leg stuff hard if you've got this toe gripping strategy. So let's have a quick look at how you can spread your toes. This is a quick sort of 30-second video of how you can do that. Alright, very simple exercise, not really much to do here. All you need to do is get your hand and get your fingers in between your toes.
point of this is to try and spread that foot, and you'll see why in a second that's so important. But is you'll find a lot of people have very narrow feet, and they're impossible for them to spread their toes. You ask them to spread your toes, they can't do it, and that's a sign of really weakened feet, rigid feet, and that's a very poor way to stabilise it. And like I said, I'm going to show you why in a second. So this is one of the very first exercises you can use to start helping your foot remember how to spread the toes.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that and got an idea of how you can go about that. Now, high heels is another thing that really stuffs up the toes, really jams them into a really narrow space, as do a lot of the shoes that people wear, but the angle that this puts people on is, really creates a lot of trouble. So you can see a 2-inch heel puts you on an angle of 22.5 degrees, 4-inch heel puts you on a 45 degrees, so basically you're falling downhill. Now you obviously can't walk around like that, so you're going to have to try and create something to overcome that, because you can't overcome it with the shoe because it's put you there, so something else has got to do it. So when you see these different postural strategies adopted, this is the one here, C is the normal one, D is the one that I see more and more often. You can see this hyperextension at the knees, really bad huge anterior tilt, so you get like excessive lumbar curves, tight hips, but really stuck in plantar flexion, so they can't get into dorsiflexion, which is what you need when you squat. So they actually end up losing their dorsiflexion from this, so it's really bad in many ways. It doesn't even look good. All right, so I understand this is nice and fashionable, but it'll come at a cost if you're doing it all the time. And it's also just not the girls too, so even the men's shoes, these heels again are putting you on a forward lean, so if you're stuck in these all the time, and the runners, like this, they're really actually, if anything, they're almost higher than them. So we're prescribed and we're told that we must wear them because it's good for our feet, but they're really taking the role of our feet, what our muscles in our feet should be doing. And again, it's making us really stiff and rigid, and we lose our spring. So like I said here, we're positioned as if we're falling downhill. So the longer this remains unchecked, the worse it gets. And you really need to have some exercise strategy to overcome the fact, because you need to wear shoes and you might have to wear them for work. So if you've got corrective exercises at play, you can get away with that and it won't be a problem too. But if you ignore it, it will become a problem. All right. So does it mean you go barefoot? Not necessarily. Sometimes you can't go to it. You need to have a sort of a transition. So we'll discuss more on this in a minute. Okay, so rigid feet are the opposite to the weak feet. All right, so this is when we see the high arch. All right, so this is where this person probably lacking a certain degree of pronation. So they're really lacking their spring. So this again where I said before, they lose their squat, they can't get dorsiflexion, they can't get their knees very forward, so they end up doing all of the movement through their spine. They just can't get down any lower. It's just like cement has been poured in their ankles, but it's not really their ankles. It's the fact that they don't have an ability to create motion through their feet. All right, so they really need to again work on similar stuff to the weak foot person, but with a couple of different strategies around the ankles as well. So this is when we see, like, we might work on the ankle flexibility on its own, but when they stand up they just instantly lost it. That's because when they stand up they need stability through the foot, and if it's not there, they're locked up. All right, so now if you leave that unchecked, then potential injuries to other limbs, especially the knees, and that becomes a real risk factor. So if the weak feet creating compensatory movement with the necessary stability of spring and propulsion, they now force other joints to compensate. And and like I've spoken already, we need to absorb the shock by pronating. So the rigid foot just very poorly absorbs the shock and can't do jumping. And there's the spring; they just don't have the spring there. They're like planks of wood that don't really have anything there for them. So if the chain reaction is there, if we say it's the weak foot, then the overpronation brings in the knee to internally rotate, the femur's rotated in, and the pelvis is tipped forward, so that creates problems up here as well. So there's a whole stack of things going on, and there's many articles and videos, we've discussed this many times before. All right, but you can see how this just one thing creates problems at several other joints all at the same time, because you just can't align very well. Alright, so an example would be anterior cruciate ligament ruptures or tears we see from a flat, very common in this ACL, I see it all the time, that flat-footed person rolled in, and that forces that tibia to sort of do exactly like this, and then bang, and any sideways movement, it just rips that cruciate ligament, and you know, a season or career-ending injury for anyone who plays sports. I mentioned earlier the other factors, so you really need to consider them as well, because they could be now reinforcing it. So these are two videos that we've had. Check the description below this video to see where you can watch those, because they are also big factors with the feet. So what can you do about it? Well, orthotics, this is what most people are told to do, but as you can see, this is just going to make you more stiff. Again, you're going to lose your spring. You don't have your propulsion. You don't know how to do it. So if you're not getting it, you have an energy leak. The barefoot minimal shoes, you know, they're great, but again, you may need to transition to them, especially if you've already got orthotics. You can't just throw them out and go straight to barefoot. You'll have all sorts of trouble. You have to have a way of slowly evolving to that, and the only way to do that is by using exercises and activating what we call the foot tripod. All right, so this is something I got from Dr. Evan Oscar. You can check his website out. He has some great stuff, great books and videos and things, materials you can get your hands on. That goes into a lot more detail than this. So to see the exercises that I would use, refer to the part 2 of this video, so you can sort of see exactly. I think I'll give you about 8 or 9 different ways of going about how to do that. All right, so make sure you watch the part 2 of this video, so you can know what to do next. All right, so if you have any specific related problems, these videos might be handy if you've got a back problem, hip problem, or knee problem. These are all great resources that break down a lot of the stuff that I'll go into with the other videos. All right, so hope you've enjoyed that, and we'll see you on part 2.